Thank you, Maya. Really appreciate you and the entire Goodwinton team. You guys continue to do phenomenal work and build a next level community. So really, really honored and privileged to be here. Oh, I just got really big on my own screen. That was weird. But yeah, so at a high level, I'm happy to give you a little bit of introduction on me and my background as well. I'll try to make it as short and sweet as possible. Uh, First, I have to say what's up to, is it Malika or Malika Jacobs? Yes. Hi. Is it Malika or Malika?
Like, yeah, yeah.
Malika. My sister's name is Malika, and I don't see the
Oh,
name
yeah,
often. And so
nice.
I
It's a it's a
have
um it's a really universal name, so I'm sure we could talk about it for a long time. But it's a very
exactly.
interesting route to different parts of the world. Cool.
That's what's up. Well, thank you for
Awesome.
joining. Um,
Thanks for saying that.
uh, right. So I grew up with Malika in Los Angeles, my sister. And Went to Morehouse for undergrad in Atlanta. Came back to LA. Started working in finance. Ended up leaving that to start a business where I was doing web and mobile development for a lot of small businesses, and enjoyed that work quite a bit. I like working with small businesses and entrepreneurs, and I like working with technology and building technology. But I also liked investing. And as I started to learn more about venture capital, I realized that was a combination of all three of those things. So decided to go back to business school to see if I could find a way into venture capital. Went to NYU, then came back to LA again. Ended up landing a role at a firm called TenOneTen Ventures, which is a seed stage fund based in LA that's still around, very active, does great work. Um, and I was there for a while. Started as an associate, got promoted a couple times, ended up leaving as a principal. And While I was doing that, I was also doing some other work with diversity, equity, inclusion. Probably most notably, I was a founding chair of an organization called Pledge LA, which was designed to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion across the tech community in LA. And it was an initiative born out of Annenberg Foundation and Merrick Garcetti's office. Very proud to run that for a couple of years, being focused on DEI and also being focused on my day job, which was at a venture capital firm. Really highlighted the opportunity to be able to combine those two things and start allocating capital to the communities that are native to me and who I know and the people I grew up around and went to school with. And so ultimately created Slauson Co. And so Slauson Co. I founded with my partner AJ Roland. So we started Slauson Co. with the idea of having a firm that's rooted in the notion of economic inclusion. So that means creating a wider variety of economic opportunities for a much more diverse array of people. Um, and the idea was that we know that there's talent everywhere, and we know that a lot of this talent doesn't have access to the resources, to the capital necessary to turn their ideas and their businesses and their products and services into global game changing scalable opportunities. And we have the connections, we have the guidance, we have the capital. If we could provide that to them, then we think that we can build something really special. So again, or just to finish rounding out what we do, Slauson Co. That economic inclusion translates into two areas of investment. On the B2B side, we look at SMB tech, so that's tools that support the next generation of small business owners. And then on the consumer side, we invest in what we call culturally aligned consumers. So it's products and services targeting specific underserved populations or overlooked demographics that we feel can own that niche and then eventually expand and scale to the more general market as well. Um, it's a $75 million fund. We lead most of the deals we do. We're pretty hands-on. We're very fortunate to have a bunch of tech corporations and venture funds and founders who built multi-billion-dollar companies as investors in the fund, who also lend their time and attention to supporting our portfolio founders. So that's Slauson Co in a nutshell, and a little bit about my background.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I think we'll kick it off with some of the questions, directly related to your background and your personal experience. I think just picking one out here that really ties into everything you were just talking about, and really just jumping right in. Someone asked, as a Black man, do you feel like it's more difficult for Black men and minority groups in general to learn the inner workings of VC investment and get funding? And if so, how do you think that gap can be filled?
Yeah. So I feel like understanding how venture capital works isn't particularly complicated, but it is opaque in the sense of if nobody explains it to you, you'll never understand it, and there isn't exactly a long, especially 10 years ago or more, when I was trying to break into the industry, there weren't exactly a ton of resources where you could really learn about how it works. In fact, I would say 80% of my knowledge, coming into the industry, came from blogs of just a few people. Fred Wilson, who runs Union Square Ventures, Brad Feld, who runs Foundry Group, and Mark Suster, who runs Upfront Ventures. Just reading about what they were doing and how they were thinking about things informed a lot of how I learned the industry. It is filled with people and ecosystems that know the industry and how it works. And if you're an outsider, again, it could feel very opaque. But I'm an optimist in the sense that I don't believe that it's intentionally exclusive, which I don't think makes it even better. In fact, I think that's probably worse. Like the fact that it just is structurally that way, that people don't have a way in, is bad. But I don't think that they're bad actors. I think that they're actors that mostly go with what they know and what's comfortable. And as it trends, what's comfortable happens to be a very specific demographic in very few geographies. And so as such, I feel like, as a person who is able to navigate into the industry, part of my social obligation as a Black man is to create pathways and doorways and for other people that look like me or come from similar backgrounds, broadly, who have been left out of the industry, to make it feel like it could be a little bit more inclusive. And so that's a huge part of why Slauson Co exists, is to create a more inclusive industry. And if things go well, if we become a top performing fund and we back a lot of companies that end up blowing it out the water, then people will start to take note and start to realize that all the talent isn't cramped up into one demographic and 2 or 3 geographies.
100%. Yes, thank you for expanding on that. And I think the next good question to follow up with, as you were also getting into, kind of early on where you started learning most of what you were learning and how you got to that point. Someone had asked, what was your most significant setback and how did you overcome that?
My most significant setback, Let me see. Two come to mind, and I'll just stick with one for the sake of time. Um, Probably coming out of business school. It was a big deal for me when I went into business school that all I wanted to do was venture capital. Like when I really felt like I had a good understanding of what the industry was, I was certain that this was what I was supposed to do with my career. I was like, this is it. I know what I like. I know what I'm good at. And this I would be good at and I would enjoy and I'd be able to do it for decades on end. And so um, I remember telling the admissions officer that I was going to graduate with a job in venture capital, or I was going to graduate with no job at all. As it turns out, I ended up graduating with no job at all. So there was that piece. But what specifically happened was when I was graduating, I was actually in the process of putting together a fund with two high-profile people who everybody on here knows, and yeah, I'll have them remain nameless, but basically was in the process of putting together a fund and sort of laying the foundation for that. And for me, it was like, this is my dream job. Two people that I like really look up to and idolize, and the idea of them coming together to do a venture fund would be nuts. And the idea of me, me playing a key leadership role in it is like the best thing that could possibly happen. And so from then, by the time I graduated, right around the time that I graduated, the whole thing kind of fell apart. And for me, it was devastating because it was like I was so close to doing what I wanted to do, exactly what I wanted to do, and with people that I, could only dream to be hanging around. Yeah, and it fell apart. And so that was kind of a major setback, but it was one of those things like, all right, well, now we got to find another path. So I'm sad for about, a week, and then I pick myself up and keep going.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I actually didn't know that, so that's really interesting to hear. But look at where you are now. You know. So
Both
another
of them have
question.
their own funds now, by the way, which is really funny. But
You said that both of them have what?
I said both of them have their own funds now, by the way, because this was 10, 11 years ago. And now in the last 2 years, they've both announced their own funds. So yeah, it's funny.
That is funny. It's the way that things go. And now you have your own fund as well. um, so the next question is an interesting one. And this person wants to know if you have a coach or a mentor, or consider anyone in your life to be like that, or maybe work specifically with a coach or a mentor. And if you could just expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, coaching and mentorship, I think, is critical. When people ask me about my first mentors in venture capital, I actually reference Fred Wilson, Brad Feld, and Mark Suster, who didn't know me for now they all I know those guys, but for years they were teaching me and didn't know that I existed just by virtue of their blogs. But then after that, the person that opened the door for me to get into the industry in the role at TenOneTen was David Waxman, who is a serial entrepreneur who runs TenOneTen. And I got to learn a lot of the ins and outs about the industry, things that I couldn't just pick up from reading blogs, and also he's an operator, meaning he's created 3 venture-backed companies. One was a pretty solid exit. One ended up going public, and one was high rising and then ultimately failed. And so he had a ton of experience in a lot of different circumstances and a lot of different time periods too. So getting to learn from him as a mentor was just completely invaluable to me. And then more recently, another mentor has been Ron Conway of SV Angel. So Ron's sort of widely known as the most connected person in Silicon Valley. And it's also easily one of the hardest working people in Silicon Valley, which is mind blowing, that he at his age and his level of success, doesn't slow down at all. And it's inspiring to see how much he can accomplish and how many lives he can like meaningfully impact. Not like, oh yeah, I like Ron, he's a nice guy, but like the number of people that would say Ron has fundamentally changed my life is I couldn't count them, and he probably couldn't count them, and it's amazing. And so just to even be able to watch how he moves and watch how he interacts with people and just to be sort of in his world, it's huge. If anybody wants to read about Ron Conway, there's a blog by Ben Horowitz about Ron Conway that I recommend that you check out, that probably best encapsulates who he is and how he rolls. And yeah, but so I think it's critical. And then as far as coaches go, I had an executive coach for a while. I've always built myself as a really good investor. Building a firm, I also had to develop a new skill of managing people. Thank you for posting that, Nikki. That's the Ron Conway blog post. But for me, I never considered myself a man. Like that's not what I think of myself. It's like being able to evaluate deals, support portfolio companies and stuff like that. Very different than building a team and keeping people engaged and fulfilled and work and stuff like that. And so where I realized I had to look in the mirror, after I made a couple of mistakes and say like, how can I get better at this? And I can't just keep rolling the dice and seeing what happens. I have to be more thoughtful about my approach to improving my own skill sets where I know that I have weaknesses. I know that if I can't get this management thing down, then there's no way in hell my firm is going to work over the long run. So, so invested in working with a coach. Actually, shout out to Virginia Bauman, who is a friend of Grid 110 as well. She's my coach. And I highly, highly recommend that if you're very serious about coaching, that you at least consider Virginia. And made lots of strides and lots of personal improvements and review and perspective of basically how to do it my way. Take advantage of the strengths that I have and acknowledge the gaps that I have, and but be able to continue to grow as a professional. So I highly recommend mentorship and coaching and sort of remaining authentic to yourself the whole way through.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool to hear as well how some of the folks that you looked up to ended up becoming those people in your life. As I know there are a lot of people on this call right now who really look up to you as well. So last kind of question about, you personally and your experience, and then we'll actually kind of start digging into questions that just advice that founders are looking for. Got two more questions in the chat. Shamika and Melvin, thank you for sending those over to me. So we'll make sure we get to those. But before that, Austin, folks are wondering, as a founder and entrepreneur, how do you take care of your emotional wellness so that you can be the best human you can be? I think this is also a really important question to touch on always in these AMAs.
Yeah. My answer will probably be very different from others. My the reality is, particularly in the startup world, and like there's a natural there's an imbalance that happens, and that is really nearly required to be very outside successful. And um and so it can be all consuming, can take up all your time to try to will something to success. And um and not all forms of entrepreneurship need to look like that. But I would almost say that without fail, if you see very, very successful venture-backed startups, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of you personally to invest in it. And I think I've always been a, a person with I guess a strong work ethic, and a very persistent work ethic, if you will. And and working a ton of hours and stuff like that, and always working. But I think in order to take care of myself and things like that, I always realize that stuff will be sacrificed that is not sacrificed in normal people's lives. And so for me, it's always been like, what won't I sacrifice? And usually what I talk to people about is when people ask me like, what do I want, what am I doing this all for, what does success look like, or anything like that. Like, for me, I say it's three things. I want to be the best VC in the world, I want to be the best husband in the world, I want to be the best father in the world. And everything else is noise to me. Like, if I'm awake, if I'm breathing, if I'm walking, if I'm talking about one of those three things. And I don't recommend that for everybody. there's other things that other people want. And but for me, the drive that I have, where other things are gonna fall by the wayside or not work out, or I'm not going to be able to invest as much into them, I just make it's very clear to me what I'm going after. And um and uh uh I mean, I can't emphasize enough that it's not for everybody. And when I say it's not for everybody, I'm not saying that in a holier than thou, like, oh, look at me and how awfully imbalanced my life is. It's more, I know what's important to me, and I have a lot of clarity on that. And I think that that's enabled me to um, uh, be successful in those things.
Definitely. And I know you said, your answer might not be as much like others, but I think it's also important. Like, I appreciate you just being answering that very rawly and candidly. And I think others who, can relate, it's definitely helps give visibility to what that experience is like and just the realness of what that is. Um, okay,
Yeah,
now now
I don't wish an entrepreneur's life on anybody. To be honest, it's a very, but the reality is, like, all the people that I know that are entrepreneurs and successful entrepreneurs, like, they can't turn it off anyway. So that is in the DNA of who they are. And so um so it's so from there, it's about kind of working with that disease of entrepreneurship, that disease that you have.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure, it also goes kind of hand in hand. The reason why it is so rewarding is, like you said, it's built into your DNA, but at the same time, it's like always can't turn it off. It's a good and a bad thing. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, getting a few more questions here now. Thank you, Grace, Shinha, and Shamika. Hopefully I'm saying those names Okay. So just want to let you know I'm seeing your messages, adding these to the list. And with that, we'll go ahead and get right into some of these questions from founders who are just looking for advice. This first one is, can you please explain the difference between friends and family versus pre-seed versus seed rounds? What are the expected milestones for each?
Sure. So milestones sort of differ by business model and things like that. But the I guess here's what typically happens. I'll start with friends and family. So a lot of times, or actually, I'll start in the middle. A lot of times when people come to talk to us and the companies that we uh, put some capital into and invest in, like a lot of times they come with a product in hand and it's working, and they have customers, and um, they have all kinds of things. They have revenue, they have whatever. That's very early, but it's all there. And in order to get, so a lot of times that's the starting point for a VC. It's like, all right, you got this product, looks cool, you got a team, it's all on board, and everybody's awesome, and everybody's working on it, and you guys are clicking, and now we're going to add some capital to add some fuel to the fire. The reality is a lot of people, particularly people that come from communities of color, don't often have the capital that's required to even get to that point. And we see that all the time, where in fact, I have a very good friend who looked at his portfolio. He's a VC. He looked at his portfolio and he was like, our portfolio skews very white male. We don't give a damn about anybody's race or if they have a high school degree or anything like that. Like, we only care about the performance, and yet and still the performance seems to be skewing toward white men. And kind of asked me, like, why is that? Like, what do I think that is, that still most of their portfolio is that, when they honestly don't have any general favoritism toward white men. And when I asked them about, like, what is required in order for them to get an investment, what are they looking at? A lot of the things that they talked about was the performance in the context of assuming that these products are in market and this person had the capital to do a little bit of advertising experiments, to pay an outsourced developer to accelerate the development, or to pay 3 people to work on this idea for 6 months before they even present it to the VC. And a lot of people don't have that. So so that's what friends and family comes in. A lot of people do have friends and family rounds, where this is the capital that you take to be able to take a shot and even attempt to succeed and attempt to build a company that's really interesting. This is not unique to venture capital. This is how most small businesses start in terms of financing, in terms of outside financing, not from a professional investor. It's from people that know you and like you and want to see you succeed, and they'll put some money behind helping you do that. And so I think that one of the biggest gaps that we identified was that the friends and family lacks, or round is lacking in our community. We don't have people that we could go tap and ask for $50,000 that somebody might be willing to lose if this business doesn't work out. And that's not a hypothetical for me. To start Slauson Co, I borrowed money from my sister, and she literally took a loan out on her house to start this firm. Like, pretty risky in the grand scheme of things. We don't come from a lot of money. We weren't like poor by any stretch, but we don't have money that we could that $50,000 is it's a meaningful amount of money in my family, and most people don't have that to even give or even try to experiment with. But that $50,000 quite literally enabled a $75 million fund that's giving millions of dollars away to, lots of people from all kinds of different backgrounds. And so when you think about the fact that if I didn't get that $50,000 or whatever money, hypothetical $50,000, then this would not exist. And that is the case in most instances. So friends and family, and that's why we created Friends and Family Accelerator, with that exact same thesis, that we put a little bit of capital in people's pocket. They could pay the rent for a couple months, or they could leave, enough to leave their job comfortably to give this idea a shot, and or to buy the inventory they need, or to do whatever it may take to put them in the game to even have a shot at it. And so Friends and Family is a 12-week program that Slauson Co is doing in conjunction with Grid 110. And then there's a $25,000 grant. I encourage you all to check it out if you haven't heard about it. There's an info session this evening where you can learn more about that. Happy to answer a couple questions here too, if it makes sense. So Friends and Family, I hope that gives you a better sense of what that round is. It's literally your friends and family, and often they don't know how to negotiate terms with you or anything like that. So you just come up with a very simple agreement or handshake agreement about how you expect to pay them back, or what equity they have in your company or something like that. And then you go to, I guess, pre-seed or seed. The nomenclature might as well be identical. A lot of times, maybe a pre-seed round these days is when somebody's raising between 750,000 up to about 2 million. Maybe a seed round is like 2 to 6 million. And then, Series A is like 5 to I don't know, 20 million, or 324 million if you're Adam Newman. But it could go in a lot of different directions. So just think about, really, you want to think about friends and family as people that are investing because they know you and like you and believe in you and want to see you succeed. And then seed or pre-seed is when you get your first outside, professional investor who's evaluating both your team and your company and the opportunity, and seeing if they want to get behind it.
Awesome. That was a really very nice, thorough answer. I think that was very, very helpful. And love the kind of tangent there on the friends and family. It's super important to understand just what's behind that, the meaning of that whole round. And kind of a follow-up to that, we had a few founders asking, I am looking to attract VCs, any tips for getting the attention of VCs, making the most of the VC's time when pitching, really just making themselves attractive to VC consideration. I know this is also can be dependent on industry and company type. So maybe just generally speaking to that, or what questions they should be asking themselves, any tips and tricks for that from your perspective?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of first-time founders approach VC with this idea of, I'm going to, get on a call or sit in a room and tell somebody about what I'm working on, and it's going to blow them away, and then they're going to want to invest in my company. I'm going to convince them that this is the best opportunity for them, or that my opportunity will work. Actually, the reality is pitching VCs should be less convincing and more enrolling, in that it's not a process of you trying to convert somebody into a believer. It's a process of you trying to find the people that already believe and get them to join you, on board. And so what that means is people spend particularly first-time founders, spend way too much time talking to people that will never invest because of stage or because of focus or because of biases or whatever. And if you do much more homework on the front end, I guarantee you it'll save you the heartache and the confusion and frustration a bit on the back end. Don't get me wrong, like you're still gonna kiss a lot of frogs, basically. But the reality is like financial time invest at your stage, invest in your category, and in that. So you want to spend a lot of time thinking about um, who are the people that I should be talking to, not just introduce me to any VCs that cut checks, um, because that'll lead to a lot of the conversations that are friendly, and VCs are sort of almost default friendly and optimistic. And so when you talk to them, rarely will you get off a VC call and be like, oh, that went terribly wrong or terribly bad. It's usually, oh, that felt good. And I think they were into it. And that's who they are by their very nature. Most people are generally like optimistic, positive outlook. It's very hard to like write anybody off on because you're wrong all the time as a VC. So but it's a very different thing. Like, for example, one example that comes to mind is Black women pitching hair care startups to middle-aged white men. Like, if you have to explain to this person that Black women spend a lot of money on their hair, like, this is a loss. Like, just stop having the conversation right now. Like, you want somebody who comes with that very clear understanding from the beginning, and you're starting at a whole different point with them, and they have the context of what you're doing, and they're asking more thoughtful questions about how you're thinking about the market and the approach, and it's not convincing them that this is a thing. It's getting somebody enrolled with the idea that you're the right one to be building this thing that both the investor and the entrepreneur believe to be true. I don't know if that answers the question, but I hope so.
No, 100%. I think, founder investor fit, company investor fit is so important, and almost more focus and more time should be spent on, like you said, doing that homework before, rather than, maybe even like the pitch itself, because you should already be an expert in what you're doing and all of that. So no, that was a perfect answer. And kind of a follow-up question to that, I think this person probably already benefited from that answer, but they're saying, I'm a minority entrepreneur, and I've found that a lot of what's involved with obtaining venture capital is via warm intros to VCs, which I found has been hard to get. So if they've already kind of followed that advice of finding who's already a believer, who they don't need to convert, who they want to connect with, I guess they're wondering, like, how can a warm intro be obtained, or any ways to really get in contact with that person and get a shot at pitching.
First, what's up, Delphine? Sorry if I missed you, if you left before I I said hello, but good to see you. Good to see you here. So yeah, the warm intro thing. Oh, you are here. The warm intro thing is a thing that I both hate and understand at the same time. Structurally, obviously, it keeps people out of keeps people away from getting capital that they need, because they're not part of the inner circle or the network. No question about that, and no question that is a key part of it. So it's like, so why, again, do people do it? Again, in my optimistic view, I don't think that people are intentionally trying to keep people out. I think that what's happening is there is a fire hose of opportunities to invest in, and who, or let's see, am I frozen? Can you hear me?
I think you
Okay.
cut out for that last sentence. I don't know
Okay.
if
All right.
others heard that.
Sorry. I'm back now, though.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. So yeah, what happens is people, we have a lot of information, and we see a lot of opportunities, and we have to filter those opportunities. And so when a VC is, when you're talking to an investor, a VC specifically, the question isn't like, do I think that this thing that they're pitching me is going to work or not? The question is this the best of the best of the best of the companies that I've seen? So, if you're doing a healthcare startup or whatever, this isn't a am I better than somebody else who provides senior care? This is a am I better than every other opportunity that this VC has talked to in the last month, basically. And so what are they evaluating? A huge part of what they're evaluating is the team and the people. And how do I, as a VC, get enough conviction in the person themselves? Often it's through references. Like, you tell me about your background, so I see your resume and I see whether you're technically qualified from a skills development standpoint, but like, what's it like to work with you? What's it like to know you? How do you act in your community or in your company or all these other things? Like, often the best way to figure that out is by somebody who's known you a hell of a lot longer than I have. I've known you for 30 minutes of this first call that we just had, but this other person that introduced you says, "Oh yeah, I've known her for a long time, and she's one of the smartest people I know." Like, that inevitably puts you ahead of a lot of the other people where I don't have that data on that person, because I'm like, oh, somebody who I trust thinks very highly of her, then happy to invest, or happy to even look at this a little bit more closely. And if I have 100 companies that I have to look at over the course of the month, or more than that, really, then how do I filter it down or narrow it down of who I'm gonna? It's how much data can I get on each team and each person. So as a result, these quote unquote warm intros are very, very helpful. Now, your question was, if I can't get a warm intro, then what do I do? Um, what you would have to do is uh, provide the specificity around why you want to talk to that specific investor. That is sort of paramount. If you're going to do a cold outreach, if you're just going to email them and say, hey, your website says it's Slauson.co, your name's Austin, my guess is your email address is either Austin@Slauson.co, A Clements@Slauson.co, AC, or something like that. I'm going to email all of them, and I'm gonna say specifically why I want to talk to you. Hey, I went to this Grid 110 AMA. You said X, Y, and Z. You said you invest in X, Y, and Z. We're doing a company that's just that, and we're really, really good at it. And here's our proof, and here's who I am, and a little bit about that. But basically, that level of specificity of why you're trying to talk to somebody stands out head and shoulders above most of what we get, which is like a blank, like a form email where you're telling me about investing in your biotech company, and we've never invested in a biotech company. So like, why are you even sending me this? So if you show that you want to talk to that specific investor, and you have good reason as to like the parallels and reason to believe that they would be interested in your company, you articulate that in a cold outreach, and I feel pretty confident that you'll get their attention and a response.
Totally. Yeah, thank you for kind of expanding more on the warm intro thing. know, it's like a double-edged sword there. Um, I see we have just under 10 minutes left. So did want to move on to some Slauson Co specific questions that folks submitted, some pretty interesting ones. This one caught my eye in particular. Someone wanted to know, do you ever feel pressure to invest on a particular end of the spectrum due to reduced risk? And if so, how do you balance the need of an underfunded community with risk?
I think I understand that question. But I think that the framing is probably a little bit different. So we're not risk averse people. So mitigating risk is not a thing that I worry about. I don't say to myself, oh well, if there's one thing that they say they're going to do in 3 to 6 months doesn't work out, then this whole company is screwed and I lost all my money and thus I won't invest in the company. That's never how I or pretty much any credible VC would look at an opportunity. The reality is we know that half of our companies, our portfolio companies, are going to go to zero. And so the question is not how do we mitigate it going to zero? The question is the opportunity and the upside big enough that that if it does work out, that it'll account for all the other companies in our portfolio that are going to zero. And as a result of that, all we look at is the upside potential, and we look at the barriers to the upside. Those are the risks. It's not the downside. It's very different than looking at downside and trying to mitigate downside risk. We mitigate upside blockers, if you will. And so it's we're always going to look at opportunities that are huge. And actually, if you could say the question one more time, I want to make sure I'm answering it kind of in full.
Yeah, I think I think that was you understood. But I also know.
Oh, well, I remember the other part of it was like,
Oh,
I guess investing in our communities, like, do I view it as, do I feel pressure to do anything, or like, I guess implied in that, it was like, do I think that investing in our communities is more risky? And I don't think that it's more risky. So inherently there's that. But I also think that I understand the blockers of communities of color quite well, having lived through nearly 40 years of them. So like I get it, and so that's part of it. So I feel very confident and on the down.
sorry, I think you're cutting out just a bit again.
I think we're back, but yeah, sorry.
No, all good, all good. Yes, thank you for that. And I think the last question we'll end off on is, this person was asking, what are some of the lessons that you've learned since starting your fund and working with early stage startups and small businesses, and how will any of these lessons inform the next year of you investing?
Some of the things I've learned over the last year. I have learned about how much my portfolio founders can help each other. I think that was something that I drastically underestimated the importance of. And now, we invested in a couple things that sort of built a stronger community. One thing that Grid has done exceptionally well over the years. Uh, but with Slauson, we've sort of built a community within our portfolio, and now people are helping each other at a level and at a scale that we couldn't keep up with internally. We kind of pride ourselves on being pretty hands-on and helpful with companies, but now stuff is getting a whole lot done super fast because people are helping each other even faster than we ever could have. And so how do I think that informs how I invest in the years to come? Probably makes me gravitate more toward people that I think will, in addition to being able to build good companies, will be able to contribute to the community or likely to contribute to the community. So I think there's an element of that becomes super important as well.
Cool. Yeah, that's very exciting. Community is key, and that's that's a great lesson to hear, know about. All right, so I think we'll wrap it up here. Again, thank you, Austin, so much for joining us and giving us all your answers, and everyone who submitted questions. And I got a lot of DMs here in the chat with extra questions. So thank you to those of you who submitted those. And then I also saw a few of you were DMing me a little bit confused about the info session. So no, this was not the friends and family info session. This was the AMA with Austin. I
I'm
know
gonna let you down, guys.
can get a little confusing if you see like emails from Luma from me, because I'm like on both events. But yes, that will be in a few hours later today at 4 p.m. PT. So there's still the info session still going on. If anything, you're early to the game being here in this session. But I'll drop the links in the chat one more time for friends and family. Just, copy those, save those, anything you need to do. And yeah, we'll see everyone again at 4 p.m. For that. But
if I could give a very quick plug for
yes,
friends
please.
and family, those of you who may not have planned on doing the info session, I would really, really encourage you to at least check out the page where we talk about friends and family and see if it's right for your company. And if it is, then the info session is a great way to think about working through the application and just what we're about. But the program is designed, if you're on this call, the program is designed for you. And we have intentions to, create opportunities and pathways for you to succeed as an entrepreneur. And so we bring the best of the best in terms of our network and in terms of resources and things like that. And this year will be even better than last. So I really encourage everybody to check it out and see if it's for them, and apply too. Don't feel intimidated by it. Every year we hear that people, didn't think they would get in, or like, screw it, let me just try and see, and then they do. So apply.
Yes, what great way to end off. And I know things can get all mixed up in the Zoom chat as well. So I will be sending out like a recap email to everyone with those links in case that's helpful. And Dana, congrats. Thank you as well for applying. Yes, there you go. All right. So yeah, that concludes our session. Thank you all for joining us. And if applicable, we will see you later today at the info session. All right. Thank you, Austin, and thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you all. Have a great day.